Hello, you guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Dream Bigger podcast. So, today's episode, I am continuing on the 2024 Glow Up series. So, if you've missed part 1 and 2, essentially, there's a lot to talk about as the new year rolls around. And so, I really wanted to structure episodes so that they were direct value adds based on very specific topics. So, the first one that I did was more so about things that we can do today to get ahead on our goals. And then obviously I had some time to answer your questions. Then part 2 was about how I set goals, like very tangible tips around all of that, how to not get overwhelmed by goals, like all very actionable. And today I am focusing on all things business. So I get a lot of questions from you guys and have a lot of conversations over DMs about all things business. And, as we go into the new year, maybe you're thinking of a new business idea, maybe your business is entering a new stage, whatever it is, I have a ton of your questions here and I'm going to answer hopefully all of them because they're really good ones. And I think that they kind of go across the gamut. So I think that it's like there's a lot of value add here. So with that being said, we're just going to jump right in and we are going to first touch on balancing a job with a new business. So I was obviously in this position. I think I can very confidently say that most startup founders are probably in this position at some point in their lives. And honestly, I wish that there was some sort of a magic formula. And I hate to say this and be, the bearer of truth here, but it is a real hustle when you are juggling both. And it's kind of a test in your passion for what it is you're embarking on. So when I started Arrae, I was a full-time creator at that point. And before that, when I was, getting into blogging and social media and all of that, I had a full-time job at a company. And I can also say, from Nish's side, while we were starting Arrae, he was working a very demanding full-time corporate job. So, I can reference both of us in this scenario. And I've kind of gone through it in 2 different stages because, I left my corporate job to start my, or not start, but continue my career as a creator and then transitioned away from being a creator in order to give Arrae everything that I had. And, when you're going through this, honestly speaking, I was working nights, I was working weekends. Obviously I'd still have cutoff times, but I can give you a look into what mine and Nish's, both of our days looked like. We would typically, for me, I'm a morning person, so I would wake up at 5:30, 5 or 5:30 every day to do my own work on Arrae prior to my day starting, and same with Nish, right? Obviously, as I was a creator, my workload would fluctuate day over day, but essentially, it was all about doing my work, my new business before my work day started. And same with Nish. He would wake up at a couple of hours before his work day started and, start working on Arrae things. And same thing, when our day would end, it wouldn't really end because we would then go from 5 or 6 p.m. until sometimes midnight working on the business. And same thing, weekends didn't really exist. And, I just think that it's an exercise in discipline and you have to really love what you do and be very passionate about it and believe in it in order to put yourself through this, quite frankly. However, some tangible tips on how you can manage, because obviously doing this for life is not really sustainable. So I would recommend having a cutoff date where you go all into your business. Okay. So obviously the goal is that you kind of have a minimum viable product before you go all into the business. Or, of course, if you have savings and all of that and you have a little bit of cushion room, then maybe you don't have to retain your job in order to work on your business, but that may not be the case for everyone. So I'm speaking right now to people who still need to be working a job in order to either fund their new business or while they kind of figure out if it's a viable proposition for a full-time job. So I would set a goal, either a date in mind or a revenue goal for the business before you leave your job to focus on it full time, because you can't have a successful business and work on something different at the same time. Like, that's not possible. Like, you can't forever work your corporate job and expect your business to blow up. It's just not going to happen. So for us, our goal was $1 million in revenue before we kind of like left our jobs to work on Arrae full time. And so that happened basically like towards the end of our first year. And Nish quit his job in like November of 2020 to kind of go all into the business. And I kind of did the same, because I stopped taking on any deals or like really taking away from, basically like I didn't want to take away from any focus around Arrae. Essentially, you can't expect your business to blow up when you are doing something else forevermore. Like, you have to have that cutoff date, because there's going to be a point, like you're going to get to this crossroads where you realize that by you taking your focus away from your new business, you're actually impeding its growth. And so that is the point where you're like, okay, I have to make a tough decision, and I have to kind of leave the comfort that I know in order to go into something that's riskier, because now I believe that it's just past its nascent stage and that it has the potential to become something. So I hope that kind of answers your question. In summary, it's a hustle at the beginning, but you have to give yourself a cutoff date in order for your own sanity. So figure out what that revenue goal is, figure out what that date is, and then you go all into the business. Okay, next question is, do you ever feel like you have everything that you want to get done? Absolutely not. This is an impossible task, and I don't think that this is even just exclusive to someone who owns a business. I think that whether you are higher up in your career, working at a company, whether you're a mom, I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where people are extremely busy and have a lot of demands within their lives. And I think you kind of have to set your own goals for what you can get done and create your own micro to-do lists for the day. And when you own your own business, I think it's very tempting to keep working from the minute that you open your eyes to the minute your eyes are shutting for the day. Like, it is very tempting to do that. And I remember doing that at the early stages of Arrae, where I would wake up at 6 a.m. and I was working on Arrae, and, until midnight or 2 or 3 a.m., I was working on Arrae. You know what I mean? And I think it's just not sustainable, because burnout is a very real thing. And also, if you're not sleeping enough, you're not going to be functioning at your optimal. So by creating micro to-do lists or specific goals for the day, I think that is important, and be very realistic about the goals that you have. So daily goals, more weekly goals. And, sometimes I have obviously things on my to-do list that just kind of go over onto the next day, but you have to be good at taking inventory of where you're at mentally towards the end of the day. Like, do you have the capacity to give more, or do you need to peel back? I personally have certain boundaries that I've developed with my work, because again, I want to make sure that what I'm doing is sustainable, that I have a fresh brain when I'm, working. Obviously, there's periods of time where it's incredibly busy and, I have to be a little bit looser with my boundaries. But, for the most part, I just kind of make peace with the fact that I probably won't get everything done, but I can get, 80 or 90% of the way, and that's okay. All right. So I guess going off of this is a good question. How do you know when to prioritize your business or yourself? So as I said, my goal is to build a sustainable brand. And I think the biggest example that I've seen is my dad, and I'm lucky to have that example. He grew a very successful business, and he's over 30 years in, and he's very successful, but he never sacrificed on his mental health. I grew up with an example of a dad who would always make time for his workouts and always sit down for dinner with us as a family. And so as the business has kind of started to mature, because obviously year one, you don't know these things, and nor do you really have the capacity to kind of make time for anything except your business. But obviously, as the business has matured a little bit, I have boundaries. So I like to bookend my day. So I start my workday on most days around 8-ish in the morning. And typically the bookend of my day is either when I get home from the gym or after I finish dinner. I will not be looking at work anymore. And the reason I do this is because the 2 hours between when I finish dinner and when I go to bed is my time to really wind down. And I find that I don't sleep well if the last thing I've done is been on my laptop kind of working through a problem. And I'm not saying that days like this don't exist, but I try to make them very rare and save them for days where things are actually very, very wrong. So if I don't sleep enough, I'm not functioning properly the next day. And I feel like that kind of does the business a disservice. So for me personally, knowing who I am as a human being, I'm not wired that way. Like I need 2 hours before bed and an hour and a half or 2 hours in the morning to myself in order to function as the best version of myself. And also, no matter what, I take Saturdays off of work. I will not be on my laptop kind of dealing with work things on Saturday because I feel like after the like everything you go through during the week, I need breathing space. Like I need breathing room for Saturday to kind of do my own thing and disassociate from the business in order to come back with fresh ideas and just as the best version of myself. Sundays are a little bit more flexible, I would say. Like on certain Sundays, if I need to like get through certain things that I feel like will help me feel like I'm on top of things or ahead for the week, then yes, I will touch it. That's typically like, when we have like a really busy period, which, happens more often than not, I'll put in a few hours of work on a Sunday as well, like maybe half the day, like a few hours, whatever it is, depending on what's needed. And some days I won't need to do that. So it completely depends on where or like at what stage the business is at and like what the business needs from me. But typically I need to have certain boundaries, like, like what I listed in order to continuously show up day over day, year over year. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, moving on. Process of getting funding/investors. Okay, so I think that the most important thing is to start having conversations in advance of needing money. And the best way to do this is to go through your network and see if people can connect you to investors who would be a relevant fit for your company. And obviously, as a business starts to grow, that interest starts to be inbound versus outbound. So you will get interest from a lot of investors who are interested in chatting with you about your business and potentially putting money into the business. Even if you aren't raising money actively or it's not even in your periphery, I think it's important to take those calls because I think that when you take money from an investor and you bring them into your cap table, depending on the size of check they put in, they're kind of in this journey with you for a long, long time. And so you need to make sure that you like them, number one. Number two, that they understand your vision, that they can be a real value add, that they have added value to other companies. So you need to be vetting them like they're vetting you. If anyone who's gone through a fundraising process will know how kind of grueling the due diligence is. And, founders are out there like answering hundreds of questions and getting on call after call after call. But I think what's less talked about is how important it is for you to kind of have those processes with your potential investors. You need to make sure that you like them, that you get along, that you're on the same page, that you're aligned. Because if there's misalignment between you and your investor, I don't know, it just sometimes makes things uncomfortable or unpleasant. And for me personally, as I grow this business, again, it's about sustainability. I'm not in it to, leave in like a couple of years. Like I'm in it for the long run. And I want to make sure that I'm enjoying my journey as a founder every step of the way. And the best way to do that is make sure that, everyone surrounding the company are people who you like and you trust. So I would say that starting off relationships early, just making sure you're chatting with people and you're giving them updates here and there, like hearing what they're up to. I think that allows you to cultivate a relationship well in advance of you actually needing money. And also, yes, there's instances where you're raising and, it's an expedited process, but if you give yourself a little bit more time to get to know someone, I just think it's a little bit more beneficial. So tap into your network and see who can introduce you to who. I just find that that's much better than cold emailing. Next thing is a little bit more practical, but have your data room prepped because you will need that. Like, you will need a data room. And if you're unfamiliar, a data room is kind of where you have everything from your numbers to a pitch deck to marketing materials, like all of the different things that an investor may need in order to evaluate whether you are a good fit or not. So having that prepared in advance of going into a fundraising process, I think just makes things a lot quicker. And I say this because these are things I wish I had known when, we were in the earlier stages of a business. Right now, it's just like, obviously, like all my friends are founders. And so this is just kind of stuff like we obviously know, but for anyone who's newer, you may not know, and this is just stuff I wish I'd known. The other thing is, and this may seem obvious, but I don't think it is to practice your pitch. So earlier on, when we were raising money for the first time, we had, we were speaking to investors and we were pitching Arrae. And there was this one fund that we really liked, and we had our first couple of calls with one person on the team and we really liked him. And, we then went into a meeting with the much larger team. And we came out of that meeting and we knew that they were going to say no, and it broke our hearts. And the reason that I think to this day that we didn't end up partnering with them was because Nish and I had a weak pitch, okay? It wasn't that our business wasn't doing well. The business was actually doing very well, but our pitch was absolute shit. And I hear stories upon stories of founders who are doing so incredibly well, but investors don't want to put money in because the founders aren't able to present themselves in a way that is convincing. Because at the end of the day, when an investor is putting money into the business, they have to believe in the founders. And so as a founder, it is your job to make sure that you're coming across in a way that have people have confidence in you, if that makes sense. So practicing your pitch, really refining how you are presenting your business, kind of gives people confidence. And also then you go into a pitching scenario and you're just a lot more confident. Like right now, I can close my eyes. I can probably do, not probably, like Nish and I can do our investor pitch in our sleep. It's so ingrained. But when this whole thing happened, we were like, okay, we are shit. Honestly speaking, you have to look into the mirror and kind of realize what it is that you're bad at. And our goal was just to get better at that thing. And so we practiced our pitch over and over and over and over and over again, just between the two of us, in order to get it to the point where we felt confident that we could go into a room with investors and feel like they had full confidence in us. A good resource for this is to look at founders who have done this extremely well. So this may not be an example that you perhaps like, but Adam Newman from WeWork is probably one of the most brilliant salespeople to date because of his ability to pitch a dream to investors. And yes, WeWork just filed for bankruptcy, but you have to kind of go back and see what he was able to accomplish and how he was able to storytell. And so like looking for examples of people who have been able to pitch really well and storytell really well is super, super important. And I would also recommend reading books such as Made to Stick, Contagious, and start with those two, and probably How to Build a Story Brand. These three books will kind of teach you how to speak to people in a way that makes sense, and How to Build a Story Brand kind of will give you the blueprint on how to message a brand out to people that'll have them resonate and not have this like long-winded story about the brand that, people don't really get. So These are all excellent resources, which I hope you find helpful as well. All right, so how often should a business post on social media? So I think multiple times a day on TikTok if possible. So TikTok right now is promoting TikTok Shop, and you want to make sure that you are creating engaging content and kind of putting your product out as much as you possibly can. I also think that social platforms are a way for your consumer to connect with you, and it's a way for you to kind of tell your story. And so the more behind the scenes that you can show, the more consumers are able to kind of see who's behind the brand and what the brand is about. Because I think, for historically, like when you looked at big corporate companies, it was just these like big companies and you didn't know what the soul of the company was because, it was just too big. I think the beauty of a startup is that consumers want to feel connected to who they're buying from, whether that's the founders or the core team, or even just like really know what's going on. And so social media, I think, is a real, it's a tool in that sense. On top of that, I think stories, like Instagram stories, should be a way for your audience to connect with you. So trying to make them interactive by doing things like the question function or polls, I think is really helpful. We actually, like Lindsay from Set Active has been so helpful when it comes to social strategy for us because she's someone that I've personally leaned on. But a really smart idea that she had told us was when you ask questions or do polls on like specific things, just pick out random people who answer and just send them product. It just makes them feel a lot more connected to the brand. And I feel like that is a really nice way for people to, number one, of course, feel very connected to the brand as they should. Number two, show how grateful you are for your audience and to have them a part of your community. And number three, like think of how special you would feel if a brand picked you from a crowd of people just for answering one of their questions like at random, and then you get sent a little goodie bag. Like that's so exciting. So I think that that's really important. That's like an interesting strategy which has worked for us. I think, again, like as I said, showing behind the scenes is really important. And for stories, I would probably do it multiple times a day. Not probably, I would do it multiple times a day. We usually have, I don't know, like we don't really count the frames, but I would say like about 8 to 10 frames up on any given day. And on the feed itself, I would aim for 4 to 5 times a week, with it skewing more towards reels just because video content is king right now. So I hope that kind of gives you the blueprint that you need. Of course, as a founder, and especially if your company is brand new, I'm guessing that you are probably, doing all functions all on your own, and this may not be possible. However, I will say that early on in Arrae, social had always been a priority for us. And it was me initially doing all the Instagram, and then I brought someone in to help me kind of do the TikTok component as well, because we thought that was really important and like just a smart modality for us to connect with our audience. And that was a really good, it was a very smart business decision, because I think today, again, I keep saying this, but community and storytelling is super, super important as it pertains to an audience's purchasing decisions. So I would say that investing in it and like making sure if you can't do it at this volume, just like doing as much as you can. And like, if you're a founder and you're doing it all yourself, just take people through your day. It doesn't have to be this like curated whole thing. Social media is thankfully changing where it doesn't have to be that curated. So I think the more you can show, the better it is. Okay, moving on. How to simply just start a business? Well, great question. So I think it's really important to have a minimum viable product. So making sure that whatever it is that you're selling is something that people resonate with. And so I would recommend producing a small quantity of whatever it is that you are wanting to put out into the world. If the packaging isn't perfect, that is okay, unless you're obviously doing like a really like brand heavy item. I would just have grace for yourself in the early stages, because it's not going to be perfect and there's always going to be mistakes. I've talked about this in the past, but we'd poured our literally everything we had into our branding. And then when the first batch of packaging came to us, it did not look like what it was meant to look like. The printer had just not used the right material. It was like a whole thing. And we didn't know what to do. And we almost wanted to send it all back and get it redone, but that would have taken us months. And instead, we just went to market with the packaging that we had. Obviously, the product in terms of, the bloat capsules were absolutely perfect because it's an ingestible and it had to be perfect. But the packaging wasn't at the mark that we wanted it to be, but that's okay. We kind of we always iterated based on feedback. And I think that done is better than perfect, and perfection is really the enemy of going out there, because you can keep waiting for perfection until the end of time and you may never get there. So before you start a business. So you just have to continue to iterate. So I would say just get it out there. I guess going off of this as well, an example that I'll give you is our website. It was absolute trash. It was a Shopify theme that we used and it looked horrific. But as soon as we started to see that the brand was gaining traction and that this was actually a product that people liked, that's when we started to refine and, again, iterate. We hired someone to help us with our website. And that's when we kind of created a really beautiful website. And even since then, we've kind of continued to iterate on our website and make sure it's better and better. Also, trying to build a community is super important right from the get-go. So trying to utilize social media to the best of your ability is super, super important because, again, it just allows people to connect with you. And then have surprise and delight moments. So we have a saying in the company, which doesn't belong to us. I believe we got it, I forget from which book, but one business book. And the concept is do things that don't scale. So what I mean by that is when you're a young company, you're able to do things and touch your consumers in a way that isn't necessarily possible when the company is a little bit more mature. So an example of this is when the company was in year one, and I'm talking month 4 or 5, right? Nish and I would hand deliver product on Nish's motorcycle to customers who lived close by. And we could do this because number one, sometimes the volume of orders that we had was just not that high. We wanted to save money on shipping. And lastly, we wanted the ability to actually go and meet our consumers and see who they were, what they liked, what was resonating with them, what wasn't resonating with them. And I can confidently say that doing things like that was one of the best decisions we made for the company, because even to this date, I know who our first customers are. I know them. I bump into them at restaurants. They know who I am and I know who they are. And I think we've retained a lot of customers for life because we used to do things like that. And even still to this date, while we can't deliver product on a motorcycle anymore, if we can, if we live in the vicinity of one of our consumers and, we can just drop the product off to them, we do that. Or surprise and delight moments, can we put a present into our customer's package, or can we send a nice note? Something else that we used to do was literally print one Polaroid at a time. So any early customers for Arrae will know that we did this, and we would handwrite a note. So it, again, the business came to a point where that wasn't a viable option anymore, but we did it for literally as long as we could. And that was one of the beauties of, being able to do things when you're younger. So again, try to do crazy things while you can do them at a specific stage of a company. Okay, so moving on, connecting with audience and creating community within the business. So I've kind of mentioned a few of these tactics already within the greater conversation, but I will add to this and say that you have to ask yourself how influencers are treated and treat your community and your customer the same way. So something that we wanted to do from day one is, I remember when I would get PR packages as a creator, and sometimes Nish would be the one who would open them and he would be so excited. he would be like, oh my God, like, look how beautiful the packaging is. And sometimes if there was a handwritten note, it was like such a nice moment. And the more personalized the package, the better I felt about it and the better Nish would feel about it as a consumer who is like, getting a BTS look at PR packages. And so that was the vibe that we wanted to bring to our customers as well. So, in the early, like I'm talking like month 1 of the business, I would be sitting there writing long handwritten notes to every single customer. And we would be packing our products in this like beautiful custom tissue paper. And we wanted this package to arrive to customers and have them feel like they were getting a PR package. Like that was the goal. And so doing things and making sure your customer journey is very similar to what an influencer would get will kind of make sure that your customers feel like a very welcome and important part of your community, and also try to speak to your customers as much as possible. So, for the first 2 years of the business, I personally was in our DMs and speaking to customers as much as I possibly could, like all customer service calls would come to Nish's phone. And so that's kind of how you connect with customers and have them feel like you really care, as you should, because you are really nothing without your consumer. Like, it doesn't matter if influencers love you. It doesn't matter which celebrity talked about your brand. If you don't show your customers that you really care about them, then I don't think your business is going to go very far. Okay, moving on. How to pick a brand when you are indecisive, or how to pick branding when you are indecisive. I would recommend reading the book Building a Story Brand, because I think it will help you streamline your processes and kind of really nail down your messaging. Because I get it, like if you're creative, you can be indecisive, but it's really important to be streamlined and very focused when it comes to your messaging and overall branding when you're building a business. Okay. As a new founder, what aspects of business should I focus most time? I'm going to say that again. As a new founder, what aspects of the business should most time be spent on? Okay. So when you're starting out, brand awareness and customer service are the 2 most important things, in my opinion. So you want to, number 1, obviously, make sure your customers feel like they're a part of the brand. Again, this goes back to treating your customers like influencers. And so your customer service experience should be absolutely phenomenal. Try to gift customers product as much as you possibly can. Like really, really, like I mean it. Think about everything that you would do for an A-list celebrity. Like say Selena Gomez creeps into your DMs for your brand. Like what would you do? You would freak the fuck out is what you would do, okay? And you would make sure you send the most special package to her and you write her the kindest DM and you remember when her birthday is so you can send her flowers. Try to do things like that. So in the early days, like if I knew a customer's birthday or like they would DM being like, hi, like I really need product in time for my birthday. I'm leaving for this trip. No problem. I'd not only make sure that product gets out to them, I'd make sure I'd send them flowers because it was this big special moment for them. So think about things like that. And we still operate like this. Obviously, myself and Nish aren't in our DMs and our emails, but we made sure that we hired the best customer service team who would really make sure that our customers feel taken care of. And even right now in times of crisis, like just earlier this year, we had this whole shipping nightmare that happened. And both Nish and I were doing customer service tickets because it helped us connect with our customers and also like show them that we really cared and we felt horribly about what was happening and that we were doing our best. So customer service, super, super important. Next, how you get your brand out to people is, of course, when you treat your customers like influencers, you want to make sure that you're creating something that's really shareable for them. So that was our Polaroid, and that kind of created a viral effect because people would share this Polaroid that Nish and I would send to them within their package, and they'd take pictures of their fridge, or we've had people send Polaroids back to our address of them. It's like the cutest thing. Like it's one of my favorite things that we've ever done for the business. So virality is created that way. So figure out how you can create a moment that's really shareable and exciting for your customer. Number 2 is obviously gifting the product as much as you possibly can because you want to get it into as many people's hands as possible. So, we as in me, I had this whole Excel sheet on my computer where I would make a note of every single person that I wanted to gift to and kind of track things that way. And, for us, not only did I gift to just your regular, influencers with X million followers or whatever, it was also like very micro people, whether it was nutritionists or doctors or just people who I thought could be influencers in their own right. So I feel like getting it out to people as much as possible is super, super important. Okay. So I think that kind of covers everything that I have time for today, but I hope you guys found this helpful. And I'm trying to figure out what part 4 of the 2024 Glow Up series is going to be, but it's going to be something good. And I hope you guys are liking these solos. Please let me know what your feedback is. I love hearing from you, and I will see you next week.